Hey everyone, Justin Janoska here from the Autoimmune Revolution and the PCOS Powerhouse program. Thank you so much for joining me in this free training. And I'm really excited to get this out to you because this is a very important topic for a lot of women who are going through PCOS and infertility. Hence the title, PCOS Infertility, How to Increase Your Chances of Becoming a Mother with Lifestyle Medicine. Now, if you've been around the block and you've done a lot of things to try to overcome infertility, to resolve your PCOS, and you've got the runaround from doctors, and you've tried a lot of things and assisted fertility treatments that haven't worked, this is going to be a bit of a foreign idea maybe for you, and you might feel a little bit skeptical and doubtful and unsure, like, really, how is this possible? I spent so much time, money, and energy on trying to get fertile and to become pregnant, and I've struggled immensely, and it's cost me financially, physically, emotionally. I totally get it. I hear this all the time from women and clients I work with personally. So I'm only here to educate and to show you another side to this, and I'm hopeful that you will see the truth and see what is absolutely possible for you. All right, so let's dive right into it. So let me preface by discussing a few statistics here. 1 in 6 couples are struggling with infertility, and 90% of women with PCOS are unable to conceive. It's a large number. There's a 10-fold increased risk for infertility in women with PCOS. There are issues around, obviously, anovulation and menstrual cycle issues, increased inflammation, of course, and if sometimes there are issues around adiposity or increased fat mass, which kind of contribute to all these sort of issues, and blood pressure and diabetes and cardiovascular issues and so forth. So it is a whole body syndrome. So PCOS affects more than just the reproductive cycle, but it is a major target, and a lot of issues reside in that area, of course, and fertility is, of course, a big symptom of PCOS. So the thing to also understand is that for women who are successful in achieving pregnancy when they have PCOS, which it does happen, some are very lucky and are able to do it, whether they are using IVF or IUI or clomiphene or whatever else or not, there is a small percentage of people who are able to make it happen, and that's great. But for women who are able to achieve pregnancy, what I'm saying here is that there is still an increased risk of preterm delivery, preeclampsia, and gestational diabetes, just so you're aware. The thing, and believe me, I'm not discouraging anyone from doing conventional infertility treatments like IVF and IUI and taking drugs. However, we should understand, though, that PCOS is a lifestyle-driven problem. So if lifestyle got you here, then lifestyle can get you out. Okay, and so if you decide to do those things, whether you're successful or not, the underlying dysfunction of the body is still there. Okay? And this is very important to understand. You can get pregnant, it's great, I'm so happy for you, and you deliver and you're a mother, but I really want you to be aware that the issues around PCOS in the body are still there. So the risks for cardiovascular issues, fatty liver, blood sugar problems, inflammation, they're still there. Women just have found a way around it with conventional infertility treatments, and that's fine if you want to do that, but understand that the presenting issues are still there. And there are other risks that I'm going to share with you later about why that may be not such a great idea, and I'm not here to say you should do this or not do that. You make your own informed decision. That's the whole point, okay? But let's understand a few other things too, though, that ovarian dysfunction and anovulation are probably seen roughly in 30-35% of women with PCOS, okay? It's also primarily influenced by hormonal imbalances, of course, so thyroid, eating disorders, disordered eating tendencies, poor nutrition, too much exercise. Those sort of things can create this phenomenon, and that may be unrelated to PCOS even. But if nothing else, there are certainly other factors. And we're not even including structural issues. So if that's a thing you have going on, that's a different discussion. It's completely out of my wheelhouse, and that is a real deal issue, and it's nothing to do necessarily with PCOS. That's always, but that's another element. But I'm not talking about issues with your cervix or fallopian tubes or your uterus or these sort of structural problems, okay, anatomical issues. And of course, endometriosis is another thing, a very, very painful and debilitating condition that can coexist with PCOS, and that does create another hurdle. And we're not, it's a little bit out of the scope of this discussion today. However, it's important to understand that that definitely has a big role in disrupting ovulation and implantation and so forth. So perhaps you've seen this pattern before, and this is the cycle I hear all the time from women with PCOS who are struggling with fertility. They say to the doctor, I have PCOS, I'm not ovulating. Okay, well, just lose weight, exercise, eat better, and nothing really works. It's you've tried all the diets, all the supplements, and then you resort to IVF or clomiphene, maybe IUI. It doesn't work. Perhaps you've tried multiple rounds, and maybe you had a miscarriage, which is very devastating. And then you get to a place, perhaps maybe right now, where you're like very distrustful and skeptical of who can help you next, right? You want to become a mom, you really want to make this happen, but you're still like unsure who to trust, what to do. So at that point, most women I find are either giving up and surrendering, throwing in the towel or waving the flag, or they're stuck and they don't really know where to go. And they still have this hope in them, this drive in them. Most of the women I work with are those, the latter. Okay, they're not the women who are throwing in the towel, giving up. And I'm not saying you have to be this or that. It's about just the reality of the circumstance. But again, the reason why I'm presenting this free training is to show you that there is hope, and I'll prove it to you. And there's a reason for why this happens. And you're not bound to just infertility treatments like IVF and clomiphene if you don't want to do that. And there's a reason why those things don't actually work very well. So think about this, right? You've done these sort of things too for your PCOS. Laser hair removal, supplements, and it's much more than just this, right? Maybe even thought about surgery to lose weight. And all these sort of quick fix surgical procedures and conventional interventions to remove and resolve PCOS symptoms, whether it's hair loss, hair growth, acne stuff, menstrual irregularities, weight issues, etc. I mean, depression, taking psychotropics for that maybe. These are all sort of common things that women do because that's what we're told. That's what we think we need to do. And it's fine if you want to do that. However, do that in conjunction with other things to get the best result because those things are simply Band-Aids, right? And that's the thing I'm trying to help you understand here. And perhaps you know that already. But let me show you some studies here, a study rather, about assisted fertility treatments and the efficacy of infertility treatment. So a lot of women struggle with seeing results with IVF and IUI and doing Clomid and so forth. And this is straight from a paper that talks about this, and I will read it to you right here. Firstly, treatment of infertility is expensive, and there is no single best procedure. Okay, so they all can work. They all can work, but it's a bit of it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. You don't really know which one's going to work best. The so-called success rate for the infertility treatment is fairly constant, and it is about 25 to 35% live births per cycle. An outcome that might seem quite satisfactory. However, it also means that the failure rate is about 65 to 75%, which is very distressing for the couples who undergo heavy financial and psychological costs of the procedure. And that's the most salient sentence out of this paper I find, is that the heavy financial and psychological burden, because you're spending a lot of money, which is one thing. Okay, it's just currency, but the energetic currency of the body is being expended. And the stress you have around this about what's working, what isn't working, or the miscarriage you have, or getting your hopes up and being let down, that is only adding more to the problem of infertility. The stress in the body is what creates PCOS in the first place. The psychological element of it is really the most, is the biggest piece of the pie I find for women and why they're struggling with results, period. So that is a very important thing to understand, is that if you do these things, fine, but if you're not emotionally resilient and you might fall into a trap and collapse emotionally, I mean, these things, they're hard to go through. I mean, it's trauma, essentially, and that sort of trauma you go through with a miscarriage, things I see a lot with women who I've spoken to, it just adds to the fire. It makes PCOS much harder to overcome, and it makes it even more difficult to get fertile. So there are pros and cons to this, and not to mention, like I said here, as the paper is saying, that the failure rate's really, really high, and there's a reason for why that happens. The inflammation and I'll show you how and why that is, but the underlying issues of PCOS are exactly why these infertility treatments are not working very well for a lot of women. But again, it is the same reason why you have infertility in the first place. So, it's like, where do we need to really focus our attention on? So, why is infertility so common? Okay. Well, there are many things, and I'm not going to go entirely into the whole pathogenesis of PCOS, but the important things to understand and the key things here to keep in mind are that androgens, or male sex hormones, are the overwhelming issue. High testosterone, estrogen from fat cells, from just estrogen dominance in the environment as well, and issues in the body with clearing out estrogens, those sort of things, the gut microbiome, and certain hormones that suppress follicular growth. Okay, hormones are running the show. If they're not in balance, you're not ovulating, you're not getting pregnant. So what's creating that hormonal imbalance? It's $1 million question. So these hormones are the overwhelming issues, especially insulin and testosterone. Okay, but you need to have healthy levels of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, but one of them is higher than the other usually, and that creates anovulation and menstrual cycle challenges. So what generally happens is that follicles will start to mature, but they don't ripen, or they release, so they tend to make more estrogen relative to progesterone. And if you're not making progesterone, you can't have any implantation, you can't grow an embryo. Okay, progesterone is the fuel source for pregnancy, right? So that's where women get stuck. Now, whether high male sex hormones or insulin issues come first is debatable, and it's different for everyone. A lot of these things come together, and it's like kind of a chicken or the egg type of thing. For me personally, I'm not so concerned about which comes first. It really doesn't matter. They all feed into each other, so it's about dealing with all the issues. But a lot of these things coexist together. And high male sex hormones like testosterone and DHEA, they tend to have cause a problem with altering the luteinizing hormone FSH follicle stimulating hormone ratio. Okay, insulin resistance though does often induce and cause the ovaries to make more male sex hormones, and male sex hormones increase insulin resistance and those problems. So that alone right there is a big reason for infertility. And if you have estrogen dominance and you make a lot of estrogen from having obesity or high fat cell count, and just from the environment and your inability to detoxify and so forth, you disrupt the signaling of FSH and LH, and again, another angle there of how infertility happens. Okay, there's much more involved in this, and I'll talk about a few other things in a moment, but I just wanted to at least start with that. Okay, so here's kind of a little bit of a more complicated and complex description of what's going on. I put this together a while ago, and it might look a little bit overwhelming, and don't worry, you don't need to really study this or understand all of it, but the point is that if you look at the top left and you see GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, that's where it starts, up in the hypothalamus, right? And signals the pituitary gland to release LH and FSH, like I talked about. So the ratios there are what's most important. A lot of women have too much LH relative to FSH. Some people have normal levels, actually, even. But either way, there's a problem with what's going on downstream. So too much estrogen from high fat cell count, inflammation, and testosterone and insulin. These things, all of them individually, whatever, it's a different combination for different women at different degrees, different intensities. That alters LH to some degree, and it directly impacts the ovaries. So the oocyte in the center there, right, as you can tell, is the where the egg is, okay? And you have, now even beyond outside of that, on the circumference, you have on the perimeter rather, you have granulosa cells and you have theca cells, okay? Granulosa cells, I mean, just a brief description of the biochemistry because it's important to understand a little bit about what's going on here. So LH stimulates the theca cells to convert cholesterol into testosterone, and then FSH comes later during your menstrual cycle, right? To convert, just before ovulation, that is, to convert testosterone into estrogen. Okay, so generally that's decreased. That second half of the equation is decreased of converting testosterone into estrogen. But again, you can still have high estrogen in the body. It's just different areas in the body are doing different things. But collectively and totally at the end, there are major imbalances in estrogens, and they tend to be high. Progesterone is low, testosterone and male sex hormones are high, insulin's high. Okay, and that's the pattern that I see a lot of. But as you can tell here on the right, that testosterone is what feeds into insulin resistance, and insulin issues feed into testosterone. So it's one vicious cycle. And by virtue of that, you create reactive oxygen species, which is indicated here as ROS, and that goes up. So basically, it's free radicals. And as you know, free radicals and oxidative stress it's what underpins all chronic disease and diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease, you name it, PCOS especially. So as you can tell already that there's a lot of inflammation going on, that's going to create a lot of cytokines, things that are very much involved in inflammation. And that disrupts the liver, it disrupts the many organs and systems in the body, but especially the ovaries. Okay? And I'll explain that in a hot minute, but let me even tease this idea to you, and this is not completely verified in the literature. However, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that this is happening. So, can you pass PCOS on your child? And I'm posing this question because if you decide to not take care, hypothetically speaking, not you, but if you decide not to take control of your PCOS with lifestyle, or you don't really do anything for it at all, or you decide to get pregnant and just do whatever you can do to become a mother, and you still have PCOS that's going on in the body, this is a concern, because you might be able to pass on PCOS to your child. So the short of it is this. Anti-Mullerian hormone, AMH, is secreted from the follicles, preantral follicles, during, there's a series of events that occur with how the follicle, that is, matures to release the egg. So that is important to understand. And during, somewhere along that line, AMH is secreted from one of the follicles and from the mother, and that's basically reducing testosterone conversion into estrogen. So what we're finding here is that the fetus can get exposed to high amounts of testosterone because the mother's making all this testosterone, and insulin, of course, will influence that too. And then when you are pregnant, the fetus is then able to produce its own. Okay? Basically, the mother is programming the fetus to recruit more of these preantral follicles to increase AMH, and high AMH inhibits FSH, and thus aromatase, which basically is the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. So at the end of the day, mother has high androgens and male sex hormones, and primes the fetus to also make a lot of AMH and testosterone. So exposure to excess androgens in utero could have epigenetic consequences. And like I said, program the female fetus to develop PCOS later in life by predisposing them to intrauterine growth restriction, also metabolic issues, insulin issues, illegal ovulatory menstrual cycle issues, and so forth. So basically, the fetus and the child is mirroring what the mother is going through, essentially, from a hormonal standpoint. So they've shown this in animal studies, and it's really compelling, and it's something to think about, because if this is really going on, then this is something to, maybe it's a big wake-up call. Maybe it means, okay, I really need to take care of myself because I don't want to pass my PCOS on to my child. And that simply means, taking care of yourself, whether you want to get pregnant or not. Okay, so I'm challenging you to really reflect on this and think about, the consequences and the things that are potentially at risk. Now, this illustration kind of looks a little bit like the last one I showed you, but I want to help you grasp a little bit of what's going on still with ovarian dysfunction. So it starts with luteinizing hormone at the top and stimulating the theca cells to basically convert, again, cholesterol into testosterone, okay? Now, there are genetic issues, and that definitely has been known in the research. There are certain polymorphisms, so things that, increase your risk for insulin issues, testosterone issues, and a lot of other things. So that does not mean, again, genetics do not predetermine, they predispose. So we all have genetic polymorphisms, every single one of us does, but they can predispose you to illness, but the lifestyle and the environment pulls the trigger. It's what establishes whether or not that disease manifests or not. Stress, of course, is a big deal, because that can also create androgen issues and testosterone. And again, like I said, high testosterone feeds into insulin problems, and then having high amounts of adipose tissue or fat, okay, can release free fatty acids. People will have high triglycerides when that goes on, and that alone can create insulin resistance, okay? Now, like I showed you, you can have genetic issues just with the insulin issues, or factors, that is. And so that those things definitely predispose you and increase the risk, for sure. They can. And it's something to just be aware of, but I'm not here to say we need to focus on that and run a test for genetics and look at this. It doesn't change anything. They're already set in stone. Okay? But just being aware that there are these things that happen in red. But nonetheless, insulin issues create aromatization. They increase testosterone to estrogen. And so that's how there's estrogen dominance in the body for a lot of women. And again, fat cells can do the same thing. So overall, the total estrogen load is really high, even though at the ovary, locally, there is not a lot of estrogen being made. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's just a quick overview of that. Now, here's the meat and bones. What I was trying to get into is really what's going on. What are the major issues that we find that's causing PCOS infertility? No doubt this has been what I've discovered in my clients, and I focus mostly on these sort of things. Now, there are other things for sure, definitely are, but largely it's these that I find that deserve the most attention. So toxins are a thing for sure. We know there are many endocrine disruptors out there and other things in the environment and metals and so forth that can easily be a problem. There's a lot to consider, a lot of testing that can happen, and how to do it, when to do it is a different question. It's very case by case, but understand that, yes, toxins are a thing for sure. We live in a very highly burdened environment nowadays. Blood sugar dysregulation, okay? We talk about that. Insulin issues, high blood sugar issues are very common and definitely have a role in this. Circadian rhythm dysregulation, so that kind of ties into cortisol, of course, but how you're sleeping, insomnia, waking up in the middle of the night, not having restful sleep, waking up exhausted, and all these things, I mean, it's a stress to the body, and that alone is going to put the brakes on weight loss, period. And it is easily one of the things that's going to drive and perpetuate PCOS symptoms, including infertility, because it adds to the total stress bucket. That's the point. Now, similarly, so does emotional stress and trauma. And if you know me and my work, or this is a lot of what I spend my time doing, and I've yet to meet someone with PCOS I've worked with over the number of years who does not have some degree of emotional stress. It's just there, whether people even know it or not. And a lot of women don't know they have it. Their body is feeling stressed and holding on to emotional stress, maybe of fear, guilt, anxiety, shame, unworthiness, hopelessness, powerlessness, especially if you go through miscarriage. These sort of things we don't really move through and they get stuck in the body. And we know that emotions are definitely major catalysts for disease if they are not moving, and they're the more the negative spectrum. So whether it's emotional stress from the past or present, trauma or not, I don't really care. It doesn't have to be abuse or how your parents treated you. It could be just because of the pandemic and last year and what you went through that. That or the past, the present or past, both, however you want to call it and look at it, it is emotional stress probably that is the common theme that easily can feed into this. And to me, that is the biggest roadblock. And I'll share with you a case study of how this was literally the single most reason why one of my clients didn't get pregnant until this was addressed. Infections are quite common. A lot of women don't even realize they have it. And I can tell you that is a very, very big overlooked area, and we need to keep it on the radar. But how to do that, what that looks like, again, different question, but it's something to keep in mind. High cortisol, we talked about that. That feeds into stress, circadian rhythm issues, trauma, of course. High androgens, of course, we talked about that. Free radicals, poor antioxidant status. Listen, that does not mean you just got to take turmeric and resveratrol and quercetin, all these antioxidants, vitamin C, and so forth. That might be important and helpful, but it's about understanding that you can't just take antioxidants to undo all the damage that's going on in the body. But free radicals are a byproduct of all the inflammation processes and immune system issues that are going on, which is a result of everything else that I'm kind of talking about, okay? So at the end of the day, it's inflammation. And inflammation is what's disrupting the ovaries from doing their job, okay? A couple other things I'll mention is that, like I said, oxidative stress is a big thing. And women will have, low egg quality, of course, embryo quality, potentially. And this is what leads people to having miscarriages and spontaneous abortion and pregnancy loss, right? Preeclampsia and preterm labor even. One of the things to keep in mind is that mitochondrial damage is like the crux of this. So mitochondria is what makes energy in your body, every cell in the body, okay? So ovaries and your eggs, they have mitochondria. They have to make energy to do their job, right? So mitochondrial damage is a big feature of infertility. Okay, it's been shown that mitochondria have a major role in oocyte function and development of the embryo. And exposure to high levels of oxidative stress and toxins and all these things I mentioned have been shown to damage the egg quality, independent of age. Now, also, there's, of course, issues with, ovarian reserve. And looking at AMH levels can help you gauge that, of course, if your doctor runs that test. But what's interesting here is that with people who have infertility, they often have high AMH levels because they have a lot of follicles, okay? They're not cysts, they're follicles, technically. So they're making a lot of AMH, hence why it's higher. But if you have low egg quality and poor ovarian reserve, the number will be low. So oxidative stress at the end of the day affects the mitochondria, which can create these issues with infertility, miscarriages, implantation failure even, which is exactly why people who do IVF don't see any success, because oxidative stress and these issues going on the mitochondrial level, for example, are creating the problem or disrupting its ability to work. So oxidative stress creates issues with implantation. And that can also relate to autoimmune disease too, which I'm going to touch on for a hot minute because it's also a very important thing that we need to have in the discussion. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, is that an abnormal immune system, which is the name of the game here, affects implantation and indirectly affects fertility by disrupting hormones. And that can decrease ovarian reserve and increase the speed of oocyte loss or egg loss. So let's touch on autoimmune disease because let's face it, it's only getting worse every year. The prevalence and incidence is increasing annually for sure. It has been since the 1960s, 50s perhaps. And it's environmental, it's lifestyle, it's definitely that. And there's a lot of factors for sure. I'm not here to give you a whole lecture on autoimmune disease, but I work with a lot of women who have infertility and also have autoimmune disease alongside PCOS, or they have infertility because of strictly Hashimoto's or autoimmune disease, and there are reasons for why that is. So autoimmune infertility is a process of essentially widespread inflammation, like I said, and that can cause obviously issues in the reproductive cycle, implantation. So it makes sense to address it at both the level of the trigger of what's causing the autoimmune disease, and also at the level of the immune system. Okay, because that's going to influence fertility. Now, some things to keep in mind here is that antibodies can come from can attack various tissues, right? And we're talking about any sort of autoimmune disease. I'm not talking about strictly Hashimoto's or phospholipid syndrome and any of those sort of things. But there has been evidence of women with infertility to have or miscarriages even to have thyroid antibodies, ANA antibodies, phospholipid antibodies. Hashimoto's is a big common one, especially with PCOS. A lot of women have Hashimoto's with PCOS, and there's a reason for that. A lot of women I work with have both, but it's not a requirement. You can still have autoimmune disease without PCOS and vice versa, and still have infertility. But I'm mentioning this because a lot of women may not they might do all the right things, and for the PCOS, but don't realize they're making antibodies to their ovaries, and that is a real issue. I've actually worked with women who didn't know they had antibodies to their ovaries, and we found out they did. So that could be a potential factor. But most OBGYNs and doctors are not going to rule that out or in. And so that's why I'm sharing this with you. So thyroid autoimmune disease, lupus, RA, Crohn's, whatever you have, you might have one of these diseases or an autoimmune disease, and that's important to factor into this infertility discussion. But for women whose ovarian failure is unknown or they're struggling with infertility, autoimmune disease may be the deeper hidden cause. And so this can lead to things like premature ovarian failure, and that's going to show up on an AMH level too. But there are things to keep in mind. So ovarian antibodies, like I mentioned, have been found in women with premature ovarian failure, for example. Okay, but you can make antibodies to your ovaries, anti-ovarian antibodies. They are usually considered to be a suitable and independent marker of autoimmune disease, and largely found in women with premature ovarian failure. But you don't have to have premature ovarian failure to have antibodies against your ovaries. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's not an easy thing to test for. We can do it. I have done it with clients, but most doctors won't do it. It's just the way it is, right? And if that's something you're interested in exploring and want to do, I mean, you can reach out to me. We can have a discussion and see if that's something we can help you with. But, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's an important thing to consider and understand that ovarian autoimmune disease is a well-established cause of follicular destruction, ovarian insufficiency, and can be a reason for why infertility is going on. Okay, I'm not here to freak you out or anything like that, but I'm just helping you understand other possibilities for why this is happening. Okay, so there are some biomarkers that I would suggest you consider, and there could be many more, but I really just wanted to give you a brief sample of some really important ones that would be definitely worthwhile. Whether you have infertility or not, if you have just PCOS and you're struggling with results, get this stuff done anyway, because you might have autoimmune disease going on that's concurrently. But if you don't have any evidence of autoimmune disease, you're not sure, you think you might, you're just curious, then definitely run this, okay? Because it could be influencing your fertility chances. ANA panels are pretty common. Doesn't mean you have an autoimmune disease. If you're positive, by the way, it's a big misunderstanding. It's positive in a lot of people who are healthy and don't have autoimmune disease, but it can be a thing to consider as you dig deeper and explore for other antibodies in the body. But and positive ANA does not guarantee you have an autoimmune disease, so just don't freak out if that happens. APA antibodies, APA panels, antiphospholipid antibodies, essentially, and antithyroglobulin, antithyroid peroxidase, so TPO and TG. This is indicated in Hashimoto's. Okay, anti-ovarian antibodies, like I mentioned, harder to do, but it is possible to get done. Now, that's just a very basic list right there. But if nothing else, the bottom four are not antibodies, but they are important to definitely run if you have PCOS, because these things can imply if you have blood sugar issues, inflammation that's going on, and chances are you do, but to what degree, and that will be helpful in understanding kind of where you are and where you stand right now, because if you're not getting progress with fertility, and IVF and IUI isn't working, and clomiphene isn't working, whatever else you're doing, then it's going to probably funnel back down to this as a big factor as to why that's happening. Okay, and this is a lifestyle-driven issue. So HbA1c, hemoglobin A1c. Okay, it's measuring your red blood cells bound to sugar. So it just shows how much blood sugar is going on in the body, 90 days prior. So it's important to stay within a normal range there, because if you're getting outside of, mid 5s, 5.6, 5, I mean, it's an issue and it's a concern. A homocysteine, cardiovascular risk factor, CRP, HSCRP, C-reactive protein is a systemic marker of inflammation. It's not specific, so it doesn't tell you where it's coming from. It just means there's inflammation in the body. And ESR, or erythrocyte sedimentation rate, is another one that's important to get done. That will look at inflammation, but that will tell you the truth of what's going on in your body. So if you're wondering why nothing's working, get those done, and that will tell you. If they're high, that's how you know. Before I move into this next slide, I actually want to mention one thing about stress, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but miscarriages are a common thing, and if you've gone through it, it's a very, very difficult. I can't imagine how it is to go through that, and I send all of you much empathy and give you all the courage you need to keep moving forward. But there's an important thing to this that I want to mention that a lot of women don't understand, is that I think statistically speaking, 15% of all pregnancies, rather, and potentially more, culminate in a miscarriage, which doesn't sound like a lot, but here's the thing. According to the research, and I remember this, that about 66%, like 2/3 of all miscarriages, are related to non-chromosomal abnormalities, impreventable illnesses like thyroid issues, thyroid disease, Hashimoto's, diabetes, PCOS, etc. So what that means is that, and again, that's in the context of miscarriages, but it does equally apply to infertility. So stress has a huge role in creating not just miscarriages and contributing to it, but also infertility. Okay? So think back about how your life is now, how it's been the past month, past year, maybe even since childhood. These are the questions you want to ask, because you got to be real honest with yourself. If you feel like there's some degree of stress emotionally, mentally, thoughts, intrusive thoughts, and you really got to dive into that, because that could be underpinning this whole problem. Okay? Psychological stress related to anything. Relationships, finances, the pandemic, emotional trauma, social issues. Okay, this is a big factor, and a lot of women I've worked with don't. They might be aware of it, or they don't know how to heal it, or unburden from it, and some don't even know they have it going on. And it takes support to really help you explore. But I need to mention that, because that's honestly probably one of the most important things I could say in this presentation, is that stress is largely a big factor here that doesn't get enough attention. So this is pretty much what a lot of women are doing, and maybe you can relate to this. Spending all of your time and money and energy on doctors and practitioners and the dietitian and the adrenal person, the gut health guru, whatever, and you're getting a lot of the same nonsense over and over. This diet, that diet, right? Keto, carnivore, plant-based, vegan, Whole30, whatever. Cut all these foods, do an elimination diet, take all these supplements. at this time of day with food, without food, take medications maybe, metformin, spironolactone, whatever, birth control. And how far is that helping you along? And this is even beyond just infertility, but just symptoms in general that you're struggling with. If you're relying on these sort of quick fixes and oversimplified strategies, it's not going to work probably. And if it did, you wouldn't probably be interested in this training. Okay, so they are potentially important factors in the overall puzzle, but that alone is not going to get you out of this. And I say this over and over: you can't supplement, medicate, and diet your way out of PCOS and infertility, even really. Now, everyone's different, of course, but I can tell you from my own empirical observation, it is not that simple. Okay, and the stress is a big factor for sure. So that's why I say we really got to look at these under-recognized features. And I've talked about all these things pretty much today. Hormones, toxins, blood sugar, pathogens, gut microbiome, detoxification, chemicals, psychosocial stressors, trauma, emotions, all those things. And all that feeds into infertility. Okay? So if you're trying to heal an infertility problem, you really got to heal a PCOS problem with lifestyle. Now, if you're going to use medications alongside that, fine, go for it. I am not anti-pharmaceutical at all. They have very important needs. It's all about context. It's all about intention. If you're doing this to get this result, it's probably not going to work. It's a collection of a lot of things that have to come together and synergistically work together. But this whole linear model that we've been indoctrinated into believing with doctors and practitioners, A plus B equals C, do this and this to get this result, doesn't really work, right? If it worked, you would have lost weight, for example. Do keto, exercise more, and you'll lose weight, right? Same thing. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable, or it doesn't work for long term. Okay, but that's just the weight loss example. But this applies to virtually anything else. It's all the things you're dealing with will collectively get better over time when you address all the underlying issues. It's really what I'm preaching and doing with my clients. So I'm not a supplement junkie at all. If you know me by now, or if you don't know me, I'm telling you this. I know I just said you can't supplement and diet away out of PCOS and that stuff, but the reality is that there is some need and justification for some supplements, not all the supplements. I'm not saying you need to take 25 things, but yeah, for sure, there are some things that are important depending on the person. And if they're deficient in certain vitamins and minerals, then yeah, we're going to need to give them something for a short period of time. It's not forever, but it's to help them move along. Okay? The problem is that we overuse it and over-rely on these supplements, thinking it's what we need. It's going to be the magic bullet and the magical elixir, but it's far from that. So some things that I recommend, though, specifically, at least for my clients who have infertility issues, I mean, these are major staples. I mean, CoQ10, mitochondria needs a lot of nutrients, and CoQ10 is an important one. That actually does serve as an antioxidant, even though it helps with energy, too. Inositol, maybe something you're taking already, very important, helps with insulin issues, ovarian issues for sure, oocyte quality, maturation. Zinc, you're probably taking it, hopefully, because of the coronavirus, so that's an important one for hormones, absolutely. Omega-3s, fish oil or algae oil, doesn't matter, but as long as you're getting omega-3s, very important for insulin sensitivity and antioxidant support, and the structure and fluidity of the cell membranes, which is very important. You got to protect those cells. Diethylmethane, DIM, good for many things, but estrogen balance and liver support. Probiotics are a no-brainer, I think, and antioxidants for sure are as well. I'll tell you what. So one of the things that I use pretty consistently with my clients is a product called Antioxidant Power that I have at the Autoimmune Revolution store. So if you're interested in seeing what I'm using with clients, you can simply go to that website. It's the autoimmunerevolution.com/shop, or just click the tab shop when you go to the website, and you can find it there. But, listen, I'm not saying you have to buy this and or that. I'm saying it's an option and letting you know what I do with clients. It's been helpful. But more is not better. It's not do all the things. It's not take all the supplements. It's strategically using the right things to get the job done and then letting go of it when you've achieved that. But don't get fixated on supplements because that's not the answer. It's part of the answer. not the whole thing. All right, so I want to share with you some of the real deal proof that what I'm saying here works, because it does. And honestly, in 2020, I had 4 women who were infertile that came to me, and all 4 of them got pregnant, and 2 of them delivered by the end of the year. This year so far in 2021, I have 2 clients. One of them got pregnant. 2 of them got pregnant. One of them already delivered. The other one's due in November, maybe December. So very fortunate. But again, I'm telling you that this is all possible. I'm going to show you some of the evidence from last year in 2020. So this is Elena, one of my really great clients who was very stubborn and very skeptical. Listen, if you're skeptical, believe me, I've seen it all. And I'm not here to convince you anything. I'm saying, hey, everyone's like that. They're very distrustful because they've been through a lot and let down. Because it's emotionally heavy, right? Every time you get let down, nothing works. Like, why would you want to try again? Or you just have your guard up. It's totally respectable. I get it. I would be the same way. Elena was that, but she had the courage to step forward. And I remember vividly, like, in the beginning of this, it was the end of 2019, and she was like, Justin, when am I going to get pregnant? Nothing's working. It's been like 5 weeks, and was on my case about it all the time. I said, hey, you know what? Honestly, that's exactly why you're not getting pregnant. You know, you're just striving and fixated on this. Relax. You know, things I teach about and how to get there and how to be calm in the storm. And it's a lot of my mind-body therapies that I teach. But I think within 2 weeks she got pregnant, and she sent me that text. Or she told me she was ovulating for the first time naturally. And that was the sign that, okay, it's working. And you know what it was? Up here. It was her mind. It was all that caused this to happen. Didn't give her any supplements. Didn't give her any diet changes aside from cutting out gluten and dairy for the most part. So here was the text she sent me when her baby was delivered on Christmas Day. What a great day to happen, right? So she was an example of somebody who went through all the infertility treatments and multiple rounds of IVF and clomiphene and didn't find success. And I showed you this study and I explained why that happens. And then miscarriage alone that she went through was very emotionally draining. But with patience and trust, we got her to be calm in the storm, and we integrated a lot of lifestyle changes. It wasn't just the mind, but it was a big feature of it for sure. Okay, and she made it happen, which is so awesome. And this is Molly. At the end of November 2019, she got pregnant and posted that in the group program, our PCOS Powerhouse program. Super excited. And now she's an example, too, of trauma that I alluded to earlier. So Molly was somebody who went through and it's rare to see this, but she went through a very devastating natural disaster when she was about 10 years old with a tornado that pretty much swept her and destroyed her entire house. And she was hiding in the basement or in the cellar thing, whatever you call it. I know I live in Texas, I should know this, but we don't even have those down here. There are tornadoes all the time. But anyway, so she had a lot of trauma from that because she lived in immense fear of her life and was afraid of death, like all the time. And she's, in her 30s now. She's lived with this for 20 years. And she had done all the diets and medications and the exercise and the gut health this and detox that. And I could tell, and I told her, I said, it's all this fear that you have that's communicating to the body that it's not safe to have a baby right now. And that's the whole ball of wax. If your body does not feel like it's safe, it's not going to send the signals for hormones to work, or if there are things getting in the way, then it can't happen anyway, like inflammation and toxins and so forth. But stress tells the body it's not a safe place and time to get pregnant. But what do we do? And I'm not judging anyone, but what do we do is that we say, no, screw that. I'm going to get pregnant and try IVF or try infertility treatments because I want to do what I want, right? And I'm not blaming or judging anybody, but it's interesting how we do that as humans, right? But we lose sight of the bigger picture, and that the body is trying to warn you and say, we're not in a good place to do this right now. Doesn't mean we can in the future, but right now it's not safe. You're not ovulating, right? Something's getting in the way. Maybe the stress is telling the body to shut down the cycle. Okay. And that was what was happening with Molly. And so I said, it's not about adding in more stuff or like taking a supplement. It's about helping you find peace and serenity and equanimity. And when we helped her do that, and it gave her a lot of tools and things we worked on individually, this is how it happened. This is how she got here. So she spent 3.5 years literally on infertility treatments, and was very, very frustrated and had a lot of doubt and a lot of heartbreak, of course, but she endured it and had her child almost a year ago, I think, at this point. And there she is. Here's a short clip that I want to share with you about Molly's experience with all this.
So we did our second round in April of that year, and then also did not work. So we were going to do our third round in October of 2019, and I had my appointment scheduled. But then I think it was the Friday before that Monday that I had that appointment scheduled is when I saw you on Instagram. And I either ended up talking to you that day or the next day. You know, you and I had that conversation about what it would look like if I worked with you, and you talked about healing naturally and talking about my trauma history and that it's all intertwined. And so I think I PayPal'd you that night and took a leap of faith and then canceled my IUI appointment the next morning. So that's how I came to be with you. I still remember one of our sessions together, how I was talking about my anger, and I was just so angry, and you were telling me how, like, maybe that feels productive, but it's only productive in that moment, and then what you're really doing is creating an emotional block for the thing that you want most. And then you taught me that technique of sending empathetic joy and, like, blessing others who are pregnant and having babies. And I remember thinking, like, this is impossible. I can't do that. I'm just going to be angry forever. And I remember just laying there starting to, like, do those things and, like, change the way I would think and, like, what I would actually want to say to those in my life that were getting pregnant. Like, I wouldn't want to say, like, I'm mad at you. Like, I want to feel happy for them. And so the more that I did that, the more that my mindset shifted. And I think that played a big role in it too. Okay, so a couple other things that were super helpful that you helped me think about there were two different quotes. You are not broken, you just think you are. And so that was a mantra that was really helpful for me. And then the other one was learning to trust my own body, and that my body knows how to do what it was meant to do, and that for so long I had, like, stopped trusting in its ability to do the thing I wanted it to do most, and so that also was creating that block. And so once I started to shift that mindset and remember that I can trust myself and trust my body, that I think that probably played a big role in things too. I mean, I would say I've probably had anxiety my entire life, but it really, like, came out when I was 12 when I went through that tornado. And then for a lot of years after that, I did a lot of, like, unhealthy ways of coping with it, and all of those things probably did not help my body or my mindset. And so, you know, the work that we did, we talked a lot about my anxiety and how it's impacting my current thinking. But at the point when I met you, it was kind of like, what else do I have to lose? So I'll try it, and it obviously worked. I had a positive pregnancy test 4 weeks after I met you, which is amazing.
Okay, so hopefully you get an idea, and pretty awesome, right? And honestly, this was a text she sent me, I think, maybe 2 months ago, and she got pregnant again. Unintentionally, I think she told me. But the interesting thing with this is that she was, for a moment, afraid that she wasn't going to get pregnant again. I said, no, you did it before, so there's no reason why you can't. And it happened. So that tells me that her body's in a much, much better place. She's healthier, her body feels safe, and she's not dealing with the issues of PCOS. And that's the goal, is to get to a place where you can make this happen, but not relapse and fall back into the hole and have these issues again. But to be able to move forward and trust that your body is working for you and you're working for it. Agreed? Now, this is Natalie, also somebody I had last year who had Hashimoto's as well. So this is a good example of somebody with PCOS and Hashimoto's. So she spent a long time, not too long, but I mean a good amount of time working on this on her own and trying to figure this out. But, you know, she knew that something was possible, that she had to do something different because doctors weren't doing anything for her. So by October, we got her pregnant. It was, you know, maybe about 4 months, I think, roughly, if I'm guessing. And she actually had her child, I think, about 2 weeks ago. So, if I'm doing the math right, yeah. So, yeah, it's definitely end of July. So, pretty awesome, right? This is Deidre. So, Deidre is one of my clients this year in 2021 that was who, when she came to me, wanted to get pregnant, and it was like a watch pot never boils. It was like 4 or 5 months have gone by and nothing was happening. I said, give it time. Body needs time. It's not about forcing or trying to do more things, but it'll happen when it's ready. In March, she got pregnant, actually, and I think she was the most joyous person I've ever met. And she was really, really kind enough to write this after she made this announcement. I'm eternally grateful for your guidance and your natural approach to healing after a year and a half of infertility, PCOS symptoms that were getting worse by the day, and several doctors who said, sorry, you're just infertile. I decided to abandon them and put my full trust in you. 9 months, and we were pregnant naturally. Okay, so it was 9 months. Sorry. It took a while. Thank you for always being there to say you don't need it, to unnecessary surgeries, hormone treatments, tests. Thank you for never letting me believe I was broken and just infertile. Thank you for teaching me how to feel the pain of infertility and PCOS, to use it as my strength. Your methods are tough and are no quick fix. That's the key thing there. They require commitment and hard work, but myself and the other women you've helped get pregnant are proof they work. So, just showing you that again, so you can see that you are not alone. And if you are struggling, well, there is definitely hope out there for you. So that wraps up this entire training. I'm not here to sell you anything or anything like that. I just wanted to give you this free information and share it with you and hope that you got something out of it. However, I would be remiss if I just left you hanging and said, hey, well, good luck. So I will say, if you're interested in exploring this with me and the PCOS Powerhouse program that these ladies went through, and you're tired of what you've been doing and you're not getting any results and you're frustrated and you don't know what to do anymore. I mean, I can't make any promises, but I would love to have a conversation with you and see if we can help you and if it's a great fit and so forth. At least want to give you that offer. So if you're interested in exploring that, you can reach out to me simply through Instagram, or if you wanted to do that, or you can go to the website, theautoimmunerevolution.com/PCOS. But there is also a button below this video that you can click and you can fill out a form there. I just need to get some preliminary information. But if you don't want to do that, totally fine. I hope this was helpful for you and you got something really great out of it that you can take with you to share with other women if you want to. And hopefully, I really hope that this encourages you and really moves you forward to the dream of being a mother and having the life that you deserve to have. All right. So thank you so much for your attention and time today. Peace and love to all of you. Let me know if there's anything I can ever do for you. Hopefully you know where to find me. All right. Talk to you all later. Have a beautiful day.